Hi folks, this is the second of two videos on the topic of creating tests and quizzes in your UNM Learn courses. In the first video, we covered how to create the questions for your test. In the second one, you will learn how to configure your test options. We're going to take a look at the features that you'll use most commonly. And again, if you want to use some of those less common ones, you can work with the CDL folks on setting up your test. So we already have a name. We can scroll down. We can give a description to this test if we want to. If there are any instructions that you need to provide to students before they start the test, this would be the place to put them. One thing to pay close attention to are the settings for test availability. Currently, it's set to not make this test available to students. You may want to keep that setting at no for the time being. If you're going to release the test to students later, perhaps you're not sure about the dates or you're not finished with your test yet, you can keep it at no and then come back and set to yes later. I'm going to set it to yes, and we'll see why in just a minute. I then have the option of creating an announcement for the test if I want to let students know that it's out there. Next, I have multiple attempts as an option. If I wanted to let my students take this test more than once, I would check this box. I could allow unlimited attempts if I wanted to, or I could specify, let's say it was 2 in this case. I want students to be able to take this test twice. The typical setting would be 1, and if that's what you want to do, then you want multiple attempts to be unchecked. So with multiple attempts unchecked, the next feature becomes inactive. If I were allowing multiple attempts, then I'd want to decide which attempt counts as the grade for the students. So if you check this, then you would need to think about this setting. So next we have something called forced completion, and this is something that's not recommended, as it says here on the screen. If you clicked this setting, students would not be able to leave the test and then go back into the test. So that sounds like a good thing to keep students from going in and out of the test. But think about the fact that a student's browser could crash, their power could go out, some kind of a system glitch could happen that forced them out of the test. And if you have forced completion on and that happens, your student will not be able to complete the test. You'll get a panicked email from them saying, I can't do this test. That puts you in the position of needing to give them another attempt if they have a legitimate excuse for having been forced out of the test. So it creates all kinds of logistical issues. So your best option is to leave forced completion unchecked. Then we have set timer, and that's a very useful feature. You can decide how long students have to take the test. The default value in here is 60 minutes, but you can make it whatever you like. This is a quiz that I'm going to give them 30 minutes for. This is a nice feature because once you've decided on the length of the test, whenever the student starts the test, they will have that length of time to finish the test. They could go in and out of the test so long as you have forced completion off, but if they leave the test, that clock is still running. So you'll also notice under set timer, there's an auto submit option. It's set to off by default. If you leave it off, then the student will be given the option to continue the test even after the time expires. So you may want to turn it on so as to make sure the student takes the amount of time that they have and not any more. So if we scroll down, we see a few more options. Notice that we have a display after and a display until date. We also have a due date. These are two different ways to set dates for your test. The display after and display until date controls when students can see the test. So if you set a display after date for 2 days from now, students will not see the test in the Learn system until that date and time that you set here passes. Same thing with the display until date. If you set 5 days from now as the display until date, as soon as we get to 5 days from now, the test will disappear. Students won't see it in the Learn system at all. So that's different from setting a due date. Probably your due date is the most important thing. That's when you need students to finish the test by, and you can set it by checking the due date box and clicking the calendar to find a day to set as the due date. I'm going to say, let's make it Sunday, and then you can click the little clock icon to set a time. The time that's all the way at the bottom of this list is really useful. End of day sets it as 11:59 p.m., and that tends to be a little clearer for students than 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. because they may get confused about which of those is noon and which is midnight. So end of day is a good setting, and it will put it at 11:59 p.m. So the due date controls when students need to take the test. With the current settings, they would need to start taking this test before 11:59 p.m. on the 22nd. I might also decide to use display after and display until dates to control when students can see this test within their Learn system, or I might not decide to use display after and display until dates. I've created a due date. This is the date that the system uses to put on the UNM Learn calendar that students see. And so once I've selected a due date, it will pop into the course calendar and show that as the due date for this test. So there are a few other options you want to think about for your test or your quiz. In the Show Test Results and Feedback section, you get to decide when students are going to see the results of their test and any feedback that you've left. By default, it's going to show them after submission. So let's say that this is an objectively gradable quiz. All of the questions are multiple choice, true, false. In that case, if you leave Show Test Results as after submission, it will grade it right away and show them their grade right after they complete the quiz. But you have a few other options. You could show everybody on a specific date if you want to. You could show everybody after the due date. That's a good option often. So you don't want some students to be able to view their results before everybody's taken the quiz. And then you have the test presentation. By default, all of the questions are going to show at once to the students. So they'll see the entire test and they can scroll up and down to complete the questions. You could decide to show them one at a time if you want to. You could also prohibit backtracking if you want them to complete a question and not be able to go to a previous question. It's not really a popular option, but it is there for you if you want to. This final option is a popular option, and that's to randomize your questions. And that would mean that each student would get the questions in a different order, a random order each time the quiz is started, and makes it a little bit more difficult for students to share answers to questions. So I could go with all at once to show the test, and I could randomize the questions. So those are the most frequently used settings for tests, and once you have them set the way you want them, you can click Submit. And as soon as you do that, you have a quiz. In this case, the quiz is available to students. I can tell that because the icon for it is bright, has all the colors. If you had made this unavailable to students, it would be grayed out, and you would also see a message that says it's not currently available to students. But any of those settings are editable if you open the menu for the quiz and edit your test options. So you can change any of those settings that we have just set by going back in and looking at those test options. So that's how you create quizzes and tests. You can see that there are quite a lot of options that you have. And as I mentioned, it's recommended that you perhaps look at this video a couple of times or that you look at part of it and create your first quiz or test and then look at the rest of it. You can also attend an Open Lab for help with creating your tests, and you can see the schedule for Open Labs on the Center for Digital Learning page, which you can find at cdl.unm.edu. Thank you for watching this video. You can check out other videos in this series by going to the UNM Center for Digital Learning channel on YouTube. Thanks.